I'm going to get started. I know we have a lot to talk about today. We may have some other folks joining us. I am Christina Francis, the Executive Director of JFF Labs. At JFF Labs, we have the privilege of actually being the telescope looking out 5, 10, 15 years at the opportunities and implications of technologies, new models in the capital flow and systems. And so really excited that we are here today. Really want to thank our partner Meta, not only for sponsoring this opportunity in this session, but also for sponsoring our activation upstairs. Who's had a chance to how many people have actually used VR headsets? Okay. Hopefully none of you are on the YouTube fails on VR or XR, but really exciting, and thank you, Meta. We're doing a lot of work with Meta. One is around looking at the opportunities of VR and XR. When I say VR, virtual reality and extended reality. We're working with community colleges to help put XR in the hands of students so that they are increasing their skills using the Meta Spark platform. We're also working with small businesses and helping them with their VR training for their frontline workers and their managers. And so it's been really exciting to partner with Meta, and we thank them. Before we get started with the panelists, just by show of hands, how many people are representing post-secondary institutions? No post-secondary, except for on stage, great. How about any K-12 folks here? Okay. Corporations, large corporations, small businesses, okay, policy. Anyone I'm missing? Nonprofits, of course, nonprofits. I got to put my hand up for that one as well. Okay, we've got a great mix of folks. What I'd like for you to do is just take a minute and reflect on 2 questions, and we'll come back to this at the end. One is, what job do you think will benefit most from virtual reality? And then what job do you think will be created because of the opportunity for virtual reality? So take a minute, hold it in your head, maybe write it down. We are going to come back to it later. So I'll give you just 30 seconds or so to think about that. I see a couple folks writing. Some folks have more ideas. Okay, while you all are doing that, I'll actually turn it to the panel. If you all would like to introduce yourself, and we'll start at this end.
Good morning. Do I have to do anything? Can you hear me okay? I'm Marcy Drummond. I'm Vice President for Economic and Social Mobility Innovation at Los Angeles City College.
Hi, my name is Yasmin Diarenda. I'm heading marketing at Embodied Labs. We're an XR and web immersive training and learning platform, and we use our technology to put people in the shoes of the people that they serve and care for, training staff and training family and friend caregivers.
I'm Greg Thomas. I'm the Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at Isothermal Community College in Western North Carolina.
Excellent, excellent. All right, hopefully everyone has their thoughts down. Let's, Marcy, if we start with you, I wonder, if you think about the application of XR, what is the application that you've seen that has had the most success and outcomes so far?
So when we first started looking at XR, we really were interested for 2 reasons. One, as a tool to improve outcomes for students internally to the college as an instructional and learning tool. And then secondly, we've been monitoring the labor market to see, because as a community college, one of our primary missions, besides education in general, is also workforce development. So we knew it was an emerging technology that would be growing, and so we've been monitoring what's happening in the labor market to decide what our role should be in terms of what are the education and training programs that are going to be needed for the jobs to support this new industry sector.
Thank you. And Yasmin, Yasmin is a portfolio company for JFF Ventures. We've got Yugal in the back of the room who leads that. Yasmin, I wonder if you can just share with us a little bit about the type of skills that you're teaching through Embodied Labs and the success that you are seeing.
Absolutely. So we're actually using Embodied Labs to teach adaptive skills. A lot of us speak about soft skills and about building empathy and training, nurturing empathy. The adaptive skills is really what is needed for our workforce to build the resilience that they need to prevent burnout, So being able to put them in the shoes of the people that they care for better prepares them for their day-to-day roles, whether their roles is professional caregiver, whether it's customer service and front-facing with clients, whether it's product design, or whether it's, again, staff training, whether it's, again, in healthcare or any other industry.
I just realized I didn't answer your question. Sorry, do you mind?
I'm good at doing that.
Her question was, what was sort of the successes we've seen so far? So I told you we had two purposes. Because the labor market was, the growth was a little unknown to us, we decided to start with the first mission, which was to use XR for education. We've trained our faculty. We have over 123 faculty who have been trained on how to create immersive learning experiences in XR. Those faculty have created over 1,061 lessons that have been consumed more than 15,000 times. We have 2,300 students now that are in courses that are using XR. It's not been all perfect, but the outcomes have been better than we had hoped for. Our faculty report that students perform at a rate 70% higher on those lessons that they do in immersive reality versus how they used to perform on those tasks in a more traditional way. Our students are, they all report the students are much more engaged. If you look at research studies on using AR and VR, that's one of the primary outcomes, and we've absolutely experienced that as well. And then our students absolutely love it. Technology is still a limitation for many of our students, but we're trying to overcome some of the technology issues, especially since we serve a low-income community. They don't necessarily have access to high-speed Wi-Fi or have newer equipment. It does require higher-end graphic cards, and so it's upon us to make sure that our students have what they need to do it. But overall, the faculty love it. We're using it. You would think there's certain disciplines that would be natural for this, more in the career technical areas. But actually, it's being used in 2/3 of our programs that are liberal arts that are using it. We started with training our faculty on how to create it. This semester, we now have students that have created immersive learning experiences. Our entire journalism program is now doing stories. And immersive stories rather than print or digital stories are actually creating AR, VR stories. So they've been eating it up, and it's been much more successful and it's growing faster than we had originally thought it would.
I love that. Greg, we'll get to you in just a second, but just to dig a little bit deeper on that, I'm curious what skills and jobs you see emerging. What pathways do you see emerging? You mentioned journalism and storytelling. Anything else after graduation that you're seeing?
Well, yes, and this kind of goes to us watching the labor market as well. So we were agnostic about what programs and disciplines and subjects it could be used in. We thought, let's just get it in people's hands and see where it goes, and it's gone in many different directions. Some are obvious, like our dental technology and our health programs, of course. We thought that would happen, and that absolutely happened. Journalism wasn't even on my radar screen at all. Every day something new is popping up. So the pathways are there's unlimited use cases for this, and once people start to experience it, the hunger is there to use it in many more different ways. So for example, our drone program students are now using drones to create 360-degree images, and they're basically scanning high targeted structures like bridges and highways, and creating digital twins of those so that engineers can look at, from any place in the world, can look at these structures and pinpoint where there may be structural issues. And so all this to say, there's a sort of the traditional pathway you would think in the entertainment industry. You would think of programming jobs. Those are absolutely emerging, and they're there, and there is a demand for training in that. But this is going into many pathways I never even began to imagine, and all it takes is getting it into people's hands.
I think that's so powerful. I mean, you heard us talk a little bit about AI. We're talking here about XR, VR, and I think taking even the step to bring it into the curriculum, to test it out, to see where it goes, to see how people are using it, it's great. So Greg, you're actually using Metaspark curriculum to teach AR with students. Talk about what you all have learned, how your program has evolved.
Sure. So one of the stories you've heard up here today is about a school that's kind of on the far end of the spectrum. They're doing a lot with this. This is totally new to us. So we were introduced to this idea of teaching the Metaspark AR curriculum to our students, and it's a skill that realistically it doesn't exist in our area. It's not something everybody has used augmented reality in some way, shape, or form, but you don't realize that's what you were using when you used it. And so the opportunity presented itself to teach this platform to students so that they could use that skill in whatever job field that they're in or whatever area they're in. So as we recruited for this program, we've got a very diverse group of students in the group. And when I say diverse, I mean in terms of race and ethnicity, age, where they are in their educational journeys. So we've got one student, for instance, who is still in high school. And he's a high school student who is an active member of the local First Robotics team. So shout out to the Omegabytes. He is in there to learn AR so that he can use it to simulate the robotics experience for other students. Because if you've ever been around a robotics team, they've got one very expensive robot. Not everybody gets the opportunity to use the robot and drive the robot. They all serve different purposes on the team. But he wants to build the opportunity for every student to be able to experience driving and using the robot in the tasks that it does. And AR, as we talk about XR and extended reality, a lot of times we hear about VR, which is virtual reality. You're wearing the enclosed headset, you're moving around in a virtual world. AR is a little bit different. It's that augmented reality where we see these virtual items overlaid with actual reality. And one of the benefits of that is that it has a lot more applications. It's easier to pick up, and it doesn't have the same technical requirements. So those high-level video cards that we talk about for VR, you don't need that. You can do AR with your phone, pretty basic phones at this point, which allows it to be more accessible to the students that we have. None of them had to come in with any high-dollar computer equipment at home. They just had to come in with a need and a want to learn a new skill that they could take into whatever environment they're already in.
So talk a little bit, too, about your biggest learning so far. I think one thing that struck me when we were all on the phone preparing was the multi-generational classroom that you had. You mentioned the student who came in. I'm curious how you're seeing peer-to-peer learning and teaching in the environment.
That's a really good point. So I think one of the lessons that we learned early on was we're using a Metaspark curriculum that was developed by Meta. And we're trying to implement that in a classroom where we've got teachers who have experience teaching. Actually, we're doing a combination classroom. So we've got one instructor who teaches graphic design. So he's on the artistic side. We've got one instructor teaching in our classroom who is on the IT side, so the technical skills. And I'm teaching along with them because before I got into my current role, I taught communication. And realistically, when we talk about AR and VR and XR overall, it's all a communication tool. It's a way to be able to explain something to somebody in a different way that, as evidence shows, works better. So we've had that opportunity, and as we're working with those students, not only can we all bring a different viewpoint to it, but as you pointed out, they're bringing a different viewpoint to it. So I mentioned the one student who is in high school. Well, we've got other students in there who are adults out in the job market working. One of the projects that we expect to see, and I guess that's one of the things I would tell you about this whole thing has been project-based. So in 2 weeks from today, there's going to be a competition showcase where these students are going to show off what they've been able to create. And we gave them carte blanche with designing what they wanted to design. And they're going to show it off to a judging panel of local industry leaders. And then they're going to have the opportunity to explain to those people why they designed what they designed. And so we've got one student who I'm excited to see his entry when it's finalized, who runs a local car wrapping company. So, you know, he puts vinyl wraps on cars. And he took this class because he just thought it sounded interesting. And he's already got his idea for his project, which is going to be that you will be able to select from a menu of different car wrap designs, walk around your car, and see that wrap applied on your car. And realistically, what that means to him is that this opportunity will likely increase the effectiveness of his business 100 times, and he's going to have a better life because of it. And he's been teaching that practical application to some of those younger students who may have the technological skills, but they haven't developed the critical thinking skills that say, now, how can I use this in a way that's going to be meaningful in my life? So absolutely, that cross-pollination across different groups of people has turned out to be very beneficial for the students.
That's a great use case. And I think the communication and adoption is really important. So Yasmin, let's go back to you, just, healthcare workers who are typically working with family members, introducing technology to them that's both formal and informal. Talk about how that's worked, what you've learned, any use cases that you want to share on that.
Yeah, for sure. So we've actually used embodied labs with frontline workers to really better prepare them to manage a family caregiver, family informal caregiver. It has really sparked. So when we work with Veterans Affairs, we've seen that it's actually working, helping communications rebuild between the caregiver, the family caregiver, and that individual who's living with a health condition. It could be Alzheimer's, it could be all sorts of dementia, vision and hearing loss. And very often, what either staff or informal caregivers realize is that, they lost that empathy because they're constantly doing, after a task. So I have a to-do list to do. I have, I'm running against time. I've got to see more patients. I've got to, and you kind of lose that empathy, that initial spark that actually made you become, a healthcare provider. That spark of, I absolutely love you, but I'm grieving through the process of losing that person that I'm loving. So it helps reignite that communication and really create meaningful connections. It's really a way to rehumanize the healthcare system, and I think the impact is just so great. Family caregivers are. It's really a first for them to be able to feel and see what their loved ones are going through, and then for caregivers who are or nurses or new healthcare providers, it's really an accelerated lived knowledge experience that's provided to them. So they're better prepared. They know they go from reactive to proactive care. They're able to anticipate that somebody with dementia who's in a room and it's an overstimulated room, they're able to say, hang on a second, let me turn down the radio, let me turn down the TV, let me just connect with you on a one-on-one. And it really does change the way that people approach one another. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I wonder if we go back, Marcy, to you, and then Greg, I want to do this question for you as well. As we think about community colleges, you're testing, you're bringing this. We're starting to see a lot more colleges adopt XR and VR in their training. Talk about what you've learned from other colleges that are bringing XR and VR in. And as you think about the adoption, what are some things that you think that we need to start thinking about?
Generally, when we first got started, I think everybody has to think about the same things maybe we thought about, is what are the tools you're going to use, and there's a continuum. You can buy XR applications where everything's pre-built. The advantage of that, it's very easy to, and a lot of them are subject specific, like in healthcare or in automotive and welding. But it's already pre-made, and it's very easy, generally speaking, to adopt that. There's very little, if any, training needing. So that's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum is you create your own. The advantage of that is you can create it in any use case, any subject. But the disadvantage of that is you do need professional development, and you have to do a lot of training. That's the end of the spectrum we chose. We basically went and found a platform that is no-code platform, and taught our faculty and our students how to create their own things. And I'm not saying one way is better than the other. It's just, what approach do you want to take? So you got to figure out your approach. And we knew, because we took that approach, we'd need a lot of professional development. So we have teams of coaches that we brought on to work with our faculty. So they learned the platform first. What we didn't expect, so we covered all the technical aspects of teaching using XR. What we didn't expect as much is there's an art to it in that what you have to be very picky and choosy about what you create. Like surely you can take any, let's take you have a lesson, right? And you have topics in that lesson. You could take any topic and put it in XR, but is it worth the time and effort to do it? Is it a better way of teaching? So there was a lot of picking and choosing what and how you use it to get the best impact out of that. So that was something we learned along the way about how to do that and how to help faculty do that. What we found out was our faculty, their language has shifted. Those that are using XR are saying things like, what is the story I'm trying to tell with this experience and this lesson? What do I want students to feel? What do I, they talk more from an experiential than just getting the content across, which is a complete paradigm shift. And I think that's how you approach those are sort of the questions you ask when you think about using XR. Is like, is it, because it's that you can make happen in XR versus a PowerPoint. So what makes the most sense to teach in that modality where you really are trying to create an experience and more than just getting content knowledge across? Some of the tools we're using, I was explaining, we have something called spatial meetings. So a faculty member can actually meet with students in a virtual environment or an augmented reality environment. And that's bringing on all kinds of different use cases for this. And we're also creating digital twins. So especially because we have a lot of students who are completely online, so they're not even on the college campus. So we're using those tools to actually really engage students and be able to like proctor what they're doing live in their space. But the faculty member actually isn't there, they're there virtually. So we're learning a lot. But the biggest lesson is there will be hurdles. So you need a good team in place that can help faculty get, or whoever the users are, get over those hurdles quickly, because the minute they throw their hands up and you've lost them, and you don't want that to happen. The other thing we've really focused on is accessibility, both in terms of access to the technology that will enable us to work, but also we worked very carefully with our vendors to make sure that everything is closed captioned, and we even are working with limited site things. So accessibility has been a big challenge, as you can imagine, with XR, and we've done a lot of work around that as well. We expected to do that, but it's been, we have a big team in place that are working on all these issues.
Greg, anything to add to that, just your experience?
I would say that I would agree with the number one point, which is that there's a lot of prepackaged solutions that we can buy, and we definitely use those. But the ability to create your own content allows you to deal with those one-off situations where you want to be able to teach something, and maybe there hasn't been enough industry demand for someone to go out and develop that solution yet. The other thing I would say is, and I'm always going to come to the defense of PowerPoint a little bit, is PowerPoint was a game changer when it was.
Else is coming to the defense of PowerPoint?
I still love
It was a game changer when it came out, and all of these tools are that. They're tools, right? They're different ways for us to be able to communicate, and I've seen a lot of really bad PowerPoints, but I've seen some really good ones too. And I think the sooner that we realize that when we go into designing something, it's not about designing something that is just using the technology so we can say we use the technology. It's finding something meaningful and something through critical thinking that is going to actually help us. I know one of the previous speakers, and I forget which one it was, but made the comment that technological advances, rarely do we see that actually benefits the people who need the benefit the most. And I think we have to be mindful of that we're using technology to build a bridge to people and to help people understand, and we're not putting up a barrier with technology that cuts more people out of being able to experience what we're trying to offer.
It's a great point. You heard Maria on stage mention our North Star in 10 years, 75 million Americans who face systemic barriers get into quality jobs. And so we see this technology as enabling learner success and student success and economic success. Where are you seeing, and you mentioned, Marcy, really you have students that are online, your teachers are starting to adopt this, some are adopting it faster than others. What do you think needs to be really game-changing to get the level of student success that we want to see? And I'm coming back to you as well, Amanda.
I would say it's back to access. So the experiences our faculty are creating are mostly in augmented reality and not virtual reality, and students are still having difficulties getting it to work. And they may have very limited technical skills in general. So the word launch or they have to download the app. That's a barrier for many students. They don't want to download something and put it on their own device. Even the word download still is foreign to some people. That those are it takes a certain level of technical skills just to get it started. And then, their phone will crash, especially, that was the other thing in design for education is we had to back off some of our more robust lessons because it just took too much bandwidth that many of our students didn't have on their own personal devices. During COVID, a million people gave out Chromebooks and low-end laptops. They crash when they try to run some of these experiences. And so that's been our biggest hurdle, has been the technology. We have what we call an equally effective, accessible lesson, which is a requirement for public institutions. If you're doing something using technology, you have to have an alternative. And so for every XR lesson and experience we create, we have this equally effective. What we found is that more than 50% of the students are accessing the equally effective. And I thought, oh my gosh, that means half of our students aren't able to use the XR lesson. Well, then when I started digging deeper, I found that about 20%, a little over 20%, never could get the XR lesson to work. That's why they were accessing it. 30% of that 50% were doing both. They were doing the XR lesson and they were doing the traditional lesson. And they were actually performing better. So the XR students performed better on the content or what they were learning than the traditional. And those that did both did better than just those that did XR. So, just for whatever that's worth. So we actually encourage our faculty to do both, as much as possible, because to share that information with students, that we found the students do both, do better. We're not sure why, but it still is very upsetting to me that about 20% could never get the XR lesson to work for one reason or another. So that's still a big hurdle we have to overcome.
Yeah. And Greg, what about you, just in terms of student success and what you see as a game changer?
So honestly, as we look at this, the game changer to us, as I think about the environment we're in, is that this is a tool of empowerment, right? We're going to take these students who are going through this initial session. They had no idea about what AR really was, and now they're going to know how to create AR. And when we get around to this competition that I told you about in 2 weeks, the truth is they're going to be in the room with a bunch of people with the power to create jobs in our community who have no idea what AR is. And when they're sold on it by seeing these students' presentations and their projects, who's the first person that they're going to look at to say, well, I need to learn more about this? It's going to be the student they were impressed with in that room. And so we want to empower those students to change our community for the better and make our community more technologically accessible. And then we've already got a second cohort in plan specifically for 10th through 12th graders to run the same programming, but for high school students who are maybe looking to go and graduate in the next 1 to 3 years who don't know what they want to do, and empower them to maybe find something that hasn't been accessible to them to get them on that path to a quality job.
The only other thing I would add is that we heavily survey our instructors and our students every semester that are using this. And the other thing is we ask students, are you interested in continuing on pursuing XR in your career, or are you thinking about changing careers now and going into XR? And the interesting thing there was the rates are pretty high in terms of wanting to stay engaged with XR in their career. But about more than 50%, close to 60% of those students want to try to figure out how to use it in the career field that they were already in. Yeah. And so we've already seen some students start to get pretty entrepreneurial about being a leader in XR in their own field that they intend to go into. And then the rest actually thought they were going to change careers and go into XR. It was that of those that wanted to continue with XR, that was about 30%. Said, now I want to go this direction and actually get a job using it. So that was an interesting outcome as well.
And if I can just tack onto that for a second, that's been exactly our experience. None of the students that have come through this have said, I want to change my career and become an AR programmer. But what they have said is, I work in a manufacturing plant and I'd like to use this to create some safety training, or I work in the hospital and I think this would be really good for teaching some of the nurses who were coming through early on. So I think it's about growing their skills that they can apply to the field that they already love.
Yeah, I would say actually at Embodied Labs, 2 of our head of departments, head of product and head of clinical and innovation, both had clinical backgrounds and ended up working with the team and really mixing the two. So it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. It could really just be, how do I serve my purpose, my people, through new technology.
Yasmin, let's go back to you. I really appreciate this because part of this is about discovery and then putting technology in the hands of people who need it and can use it for not only productivity, but being more creative in how they get things done. So we've talked a lot about VR today. I want to just throw a question at you all around the intersection of VR, XR, and AI. What are you all thinking about it? Has that come up at all? And we'll start with Yasmin and then go back to you, Marcy and Greg.
So, I mean, VR, XR, and AI, I think, again, as long as we're able, much to what you both said, it's about, is this transforming? Is this adding? Is this empowering? And just, keeping that North Star of, is this really serving its purpose and its goal and its mission? There's so much conversation around AI. How can we use that to really power up what we've already built? How do we, serve the students and the learners in a way that is really meaningful and based on what they've learned, what they already know, what their curiosity is? How do we amplify that? And again, give them the opportunity to explore more as opposed to channeling them into just one direction. So the idea is to constantly try and use those technologies to plant the seeds and see what grows out of that, because this is where we're sparking that creativity.
Greg, do you want to start? And then we'll go to Marcy.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that 100%. I think when you go in and you look at designing things like AR, VR, XR experiences, it requires a lot of different skill sets. And I think what AI can do, if we're looking at a positive, is make that even more accessible. So as I go to create something in AR, for instance, maybe I am not the creative type in terms of what the graphics will look like. AI can help with that. Maybe I am that person and putting together a script for something isn't my strength. AI can help with that too. But I do think that you raised an excellent and the ultimate point. We just need to make sure that we keep in mind that these are tools and that they are tools that should be used for the benefit of mankind, and we have to make sure that we push them in that direction.
So we're using it right now. We're using AI in our XR development. So we're using it for a couple of ways. One is to speed up the rate at which we can create content and learning experiences. What we're finding is it pulls everything in. So one of the biggest time drains in content creation is finding, for faculty to find that video they really want to use or that object they want to start building the lesson around. And so it definitely speeds that up, but it pulls in all kinds of stuff. So while it finds things quicker, you've got to be more adept at curating what it is. Most of what it's pulling in is not accessible. It's not closed captioned. It's not, there's issues with getting it accessible. But that's still true of most things you go out try to find in any sort of marketplace there is. So it hasn't solved any of those sort of issues yet. I hope we make some end runs as far as that goes. We only have it in the hands of faculty in the fall. We're actually going to put it in the hands of students where they can self-direct their own learning. So they basically can create their own learning experiences with an AR avatar. So the avatar comes up, it says, what do you want to learn? I want to learn how a defibrillator works, and it'll say, find a video, find this, find that. So I'll stay tuned. I'll know more about that. And we're using it to create what we call spatial AI. So that would be, we're using it in some projects this summer, like what if we did this for like air pollution, right? We have this 360 environment of a specific spot in Los Angeles. We've got all the data on what air pollution is like, and we're experimenting like, what if we did this? What does it do with the air pollution? So it simulates that, and you're actually physically in that environment, so you could see what the impact is. So that is very exciting to me. But those are the uses, and similar to what you've been hearing about the use of AI in general, it all applies to XR. But it is exciting, and I just see it as another frontier, basically, that's going to expand the use of XR and its application, basically.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about what you learn over
Yeah.
the next year with the teachers as well as the students. So I want to go back to the audience, the two questions that I asked earlier, and those who actually wrote stuff down. I'm curious if anyone wants to share what job you think can be trained on VR, or the next question, what job might exist because of the existence of XR? Anyone want to share with the group?
Thanks, so great session. So in terms of what jobs might exist, working on curriculum so that learners can have a meaningful experience not in person in the metaverse where they can be learning whatever it is that their coursework is. We've been thinking, I work with the Possible Zone in Boston, and we've been thinking about how to scale our youth entrepreneurship program and looking at the metaverse and how can we scale beyond our physical business because we can't buy a building in every city. So how can we use the metaverse to reach students in a meaningful way that's not just online, really kind of stagnant learning with like a drop-down menu? How can we have it be a little more personalized and engaging? So people who are going to be creating those spaces.
Love that. Love that.
I do see that as one of the advantages of AI as well, is that, as an instructor, you can create an experience you want students to have, and then you could say, now explore further or take this to the next level through the use of your own sort of curated experiences. And it enables them also to be personalized. So you've got what the instructor gives you, but then you can personalize it even further. Like now you could say, apply this, whatever you just learned in this field, and hopefully through AI together with XR, they can create that experience for themselves that's more personalized to their own learning.
Absolutely. And again, I think on the discovery side, particularly with youth, putting them in a situation where they can feel, like have the whole body experience of doing something, really propels them to think about it as an option going forward. So I like that one. Anyone else want to share with the group? Come on, folks. I know you've got thoughts. Go ahead and back.
In terms of what can be taught on VR, again, it all comes down to the convenience of it, right? And automating the ropes, but it being a deeper, more meaningful experience than just watching video. And so at our school, we've had students create on-floor training VR demo and experience for Tesla. We've had a graduate who has gone on and started what's now a successful company that trains people in the mining industry about use of equipment. So a lot of it is about training and it just being that kind of next level of a meaningful kind of richer experience.
Appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I think I saw a hand up. Okay.
I was thinking about what you mentioned where, like, journalism, right? You're like, I didn't even think that was going to be a thing that this got used for, but there's going to be, I guess I'm starting to think about these components like set design, right? There's going to be creative, like, art students who are going to create set designs, like, for these experiences, right? I think that's really cool to think about, like, all the interdisciplinary things that will happen in, like, a career. Like, I'm a set designer for,
Right.
like, VR. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's where my head's at.
I like that. Thank you.
I just pick a couple examples of
Okay.
these. Accenture is the biggest purchaser of Oculus, but every single person who works for Accenture gets onboarded and they get in that.
Yes.
Like, and so for us, like, we're thinking about how we train kids to be able to, that's the experience folks are going to have, kids can have that piece of it. And then we're working with Dreamscape Learn, and so I'm which is at ASU, so we're taking the curriculum and design for college and bringing that down for middle and high school. But similar to what you just shared, like, we're seeing much higher numbers in terms of retention, kids who build empathy, so kids who are, not kids, students who are, sorry, showing my age, in biology, they can be much higher, and the higher retention and also just learning more. So it's already here.
It's already here. It's already here. Now it's about how do we integrate it and use it. It's a different modality of learning that many people can benefit from. There are still some students that may not be able to leverage it, but I appreciate that. Any other thoughts? Yes.
It's more of a question, really. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around, because I completely understand teaching skills and tasks and all this, but the more subtle things like social interaction, applying for jobs, interviewing,
So one thing I would say is an XR world, a VR world, it gives us the endless possibilities. So if we set up, and especially with the use of AI, as we have AI and it becomes smarter, we can have students work through, right now you can work out, and some of the best things you can do with students is send them out and have them interview with somebody, right? Do a mock interview with somebody in an industry. But the truth is you don't always have that opportunity. The use of VR and AI, you could set up simulated interviews that are going to be very lifelike in a number of situations that you may not actually have local access to. So I think that that would be a great environment. And then you can do, since it is a simulation, you can throw in things. You can throw in distractions in the room. You can throw in things that throw off students, even though they've been through the practice, because it doesn't work. So I think by giving us access to a virtual world that we may not have access to that situation where we live, it could expand on that human connection part infinitely. So.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I was going to say, I mean, this is purely what Embodied Labs does. It's really putting the person in the shoes of. So you walk through, let's say, Beatrice, who has early onset Alzheimer's, and as she's navigating through her life, the dynamics with her family, with her grandson, with her daughter changes, and she's realizing that things are changing. So it does nurture empathy. It does, you know, it does allow also people to understand and better communicate and find different ways to communicate. If, you know, if you're even in a product design team, again, going back to, you know, the scene, you know, creating scenes, if you understand what it means to have Parkinson's, would you create a bottle of shampoo that looks exactly like a bottle of conditioner? Probably not. So it's really about, you know, taking those traditional jobs and being able to put the customer or the patient, the individual, the person at the very center of your experience. And this is the soft skill, which I think soft skill is such a, it's more adaptive skills. It's you know, it's no longer a hard skill versus soft skills. They need to go hand in hand together. This is, you know, this is about empowering, you know, our next generation and, you know, our upskills and reskills. Yeah.
Really for students who are ready to start job searching and getting the practice so that they feel confident.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the study that we did with Meta, with small businesses, even for middle managers who are now managing staff for the first time, teaching them how, or putting them in a scenario where they can learn how to have the hard conversations before they actually have to have the hard conversations so that they have that practice. So lots of application in that area. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
So I run a network of career STEM schools in Sarasota, Texas, but I've been thinking a lot about sort of the overcorrection and the loss of the humanities. And what I'm hearing you all talk about has a lot of adaptive skills in humanities. So my question is, have you all considered how to explicitly connect this to like fields of humanities and careers so that people might choose a communications degree or like that might be how we save the humanities?
Lots on that.
So I would say, and this is probably just from my personal, I have a wife who teaches humanities. That's her thing. And one thing that I'll say is that when we talk about the humanities, we talk about things like art and music, which are essential to how we function as human beings. And it goes back to the interviewing question. There's a lot of things that you will not have the opportunity, especially if you're in an economically disadvantaged area, to ever experience in your life. And so AR and VR opens up that world to teach those things that before you had to be able to fly someone to wherever it was located. As opposed to seeing, we can all see pictures of paintings online, but there's a difference between seeing a picture of a painting and being able to see it in a way where you can see the brush strokes, or you can walk around the statue. And so I think that VR, AR, XR, it gives us the opportunity to introduce humanities in a way that is accessible to people, and then that'll build that foundational knowledge that's required to just be a good person.
Excellent.
All I could say is I've heard multiple times faculty say, this is going to save my program, this is going to save my discipline. So, you know, I can say some of our most popular, because I see the stats on what lessons get used that are in our library, and one of them was called the bridge test, and I thought, oh, that's the construction department or architecture department probably created that one. It was the English department. And it was about how a bridge gets constructed. And the instructor created this XR lesson that used it as a metaphor for how you construct a creative writing piece. Not only is it phenomenally popular, but the success rates in that class just went through the roof. And so I could hear students occasionally say, oh, they would talk about the span of the bridge. Oh, no, that story, you need to work on the span of the, so they remember it, to be able to go through an experience, apply it in terms of constructing a bridge. It's just, the engagement, that's all I've heard. And it comes a lot from our humanities sort of faculty about, they're thrilled with what this enables them to do, because one of the advantages we know for career technical education is the hands-on. The retention rates are higher and the success rates are higher because students get hands-on. This enables you to make humanities hands-on.
Yeah. Well, just like that, time is done. Just like that. I want to just thank you, Marcy, Yasmin, and Greg, for being on the panel. Thank you all for attending. We have time, I think, for you all to mingle after if you have any other questions, but we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.